We're in Job 9, and this is number 9, Christ's core conflict on the cross. And what I'm going to do first is take a rabbit's trail regarding another question. And just like the one this morning, it is pertinent to the lesson, and so we can go ahead and address them because it is a good question. And the question was, I believe it was Wednesday night, how can we say that on one hand, God turned the lights off in the universe to find the angels, and on the next hand, that we can see God turning the lights off to hide the angels. Now, we went through this study, and like I said, I believe it was Wednesday night, and you come down to Job chapter 9. Now, this is talking about Lucifer's judgment, and it involved the heavens and the earth. We've studied these things out before somewhat, and what I was doing was relating the fact, and more or less going over the fact that I had a debate, as it were, with a man who's the head of the BBF over young earth, old earth. But in the process of my going over in my mind and bringing this lesson, I happened to mention why God might have turned the lights out at the point of creation at that judgment. So verse number 5, which removeth the mountains, and they know not, which overturned them in his anger. He shook the earth out of her place, the pillars thereof tremble. He commanded the sun, and it riseth not. And we look back in Genesis, and of course the sun went out, and it had no relevance or bearing upon the earth, which was out of orbit anyway, and sealeth up the stars. And so we see basically the universe in chaos and the universe in darkness. Now, it's our opinion, traced out through Scripture, that when Lucifer amassed his army, went up Jacob's ladder, that the Lord punished him. But it wasn't just him. He was the commander-in-chief. He was the leader of this onslaught. Punched him in the nose, and all of them came tumbling down, and they hit earth. And the Lord then sent the other angels down after them, and there was a battle. Many of the things we see throughout our solar system, I believe, are part of that battle. And God just simply said, phooey on this, here's how we'll round them all up and know that we have them. We'll just seal up the stars, turn off the sun. Of course, there's no light of the moon, which is a reflector. And there you have the angels, which are against the darkness of the universe. And the good angels, which outnumbered the bad angels, just simply surrounded them, took them up to the third heavens to begin the judgment. Well, if that happened, and I do believe that it's possible, and that that's the reason, then how can we say at the cross, when God turned the lights out, that the angels were not seen, nor could the angels see? And how can this be? So that's a good question. Now, you have to understand that at that point, there was a threefold darkness: the land, the earth, and the sun. And the darkness was a darkness of a different kind. So we're going to go from here and turn to 1 John chapter 1. Now, the first thing we're going to do is show you that there are different kinds of light, and we're going to end up with different kinds of darkness. There is some light which there is absolutely no darkness at all. And there is some darkness which absorbs the light and cannot be dispelled by light. So we'll look at this starting with the 1 John chapter 1, verse 5. This then is the message which we have heard of him declared to you, that God is light. Now, he is so powerful, so brilliant, so pure, that in him is no darkness at all. There's no shades of darkness. As a matter of fact, it says in James, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. God does not emit a shadow because it's so bright and brilliant that he lights everything in him and around him. So, here is light with no darkness. But there's also such a thing as darkness with no light. Now, obviously, in the first case, when God turned out the natural lights, he didn't turn out the lights of the angels, and that this light was a different kind of light. There was still ambient light. There was still some source of light in the universe. But he's going to then enshroud the cross with a light with a darkness rather that absorbs light. So let's go back to Exodus 10. Now, remember why we're doing this, because we believe that on the cross, that God did something that took Lucifer by surprise. We know, according to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, that Lucifer wanted the crucifixion. He was the one in Judas betraying Christ to that point. The Apostle Paul tells us if they had known everything about the crucifixion, they wouldn't have done it. It has to do with the mystery and all that was accomplished by Christ there in reclaiming the entire universe. But we believe that God did something there that was not readily known. And that is, at 12 noon, he shut off the lights. And this darkness was going to be for 3 hours. And that Jesus Christ was going to yell from the cross to his adversary. And we saw that the last time. Who is he that contends with me? Let him come to me. Let us stand together. Let's duke it out. Brave words for a guy whose hands were nailed to the cross, but that's exactly what he did. And he gave Lucifer orientation to where he was, so that the initial fight, the fight that goes all the way back, is between Christ and Lucifer in resolving the angelic conflict. But it's therein that we have the problem. What about some of these other angels? Well, they're in this type of darkness. Exodus 10, verse 21. The Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand toward heaven, that there might be darkness over the land of Egypt. Even darkness," now note this, "which may be felt." Verse 22. There was a thick darkness in the land of Egypt. Verse 23. They saw not one another, neither arose any from his place for 3 days. But the children of Israel had light in their dwelling. And see, that's dark. You can't see your hand in front of your face. There is not much movement because all light is extinguished or absorbed or prevented from shining. All right? Let's go to Deuteronomy 28. Now here we have an illustration of just how dark it is. Deuteronomy 28 and verse 29. It's a reference to the eye, the mechanism for seeing light. Now, it's one thing if there is light, and there's one thing if the light functions normally and there is darkness, but there is another thing if the mechanism which brings light into the brain is so damaged and blocked that no light can penetrate. And so that's what this is. Verse 29. And you shall grope at noonday, the brightest time for the sun in a cloudless sky, as the blind grope in darkness. So the type of darkness which was felt they couldn't see is darkness that is like that of a blind person with no mechanism to take in the light, transmit the light back into the soul, so that indeed it's a situation of total darkness. Let's go to Amos chapter 5. Amos chapter 5. All right. And verse 18. It says there, "Woe unto you that desire the day of the Lord. To what end is it for you? The day of the Lord is darkness and not light." Verse 20. Shall not the day of the Lord be darkness and not light, even very dark? There is no brightness in it. Now, what we're doing by looking at these verses is contrasting the two times when the sun went out. Here, there was nothing additional or supernatural associated with it, so that when the lights went out, the angels, being spirits in a flame of fire, were still burning bright, and so God rounded them up, just like fireflies. We knew exactly where they were and took them all in, and now you're judging them. But at this point, it was a different kind of light. When the light went out, the angels could not see, and even their own light was absorbed, so they couldn't move about. Now let's go to just a couple other places here. Matthew chapter 6. Matthew 6 and verse number 22. The light, or the light receiver of the body, is the eye. If therefore your eye be single, and that word means whole, healthy, functioning normally, the whole body is full of light. But if your eye is evil, if it's sick, or the mechanism, the nerves are damaged, your whole body shall be full of darkness. If therefore the light that is in you be darkness, how great is that darkness? And so the point is, again, because it can't receive light, there is no way that the soul of a blind person can picture these things, can perceive them, because the mechanism is damaged. John chapter 1. John chapter 1 and verse number 5. Now, this has direct bearing to that of the comprehension abilities of man. When we see things, we say, well, the light bulb goes on. We see it. We've seen the light, and so forth. But it also tells us regarding another type of darkness. Verse 5. The light shineth in darkness. Now, what usually happens when you light a candle or flick the switch and you're in a dark room and you do these things? What happens to the darkness? It's dispelled. The darkness becomes light. The light chases away the darkness. But here is a situation, now it has to do with human perception, but the kind of darkness that we're talking about, and the darkness comprehended it not. It means that the light came on in the hearts of men, and men's hearts were so darkened that it absorbed the light. It had no impact, no effect, and they couldn't see it. They just could not understand it. And it's that type of darkness that was around the cross. Now we're going to Jude here. Verse 13, chapter 1. There's only one chapter. And we're going to see an unusual term here. Jude 1 and verse number 13. Raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame, wandering stars. And now notice how he puts this. It's unusual. You would think that all darkness is black. However, that's not true. Just as there are varying shades of light, you get the pure light and everything in between, from dawn to dusk, those are varying shades of darkness. And note this, to whom is reserved, and it's a different word in the Greek, the blackness of darkness forever. So it's one thing to be dark, but it's another thing to remove the light, all ambient light. It's another thing to have the darkness to absorb the light. And so when you finally have these three things enshrouding the land, earth, and the sun being put out, you come to the cross and you can't see anything. Because the real battle is not going on externally. The real battle is going on in Lucifer's soul and in the soul of the Lord Jesus Christ. Who is he that could let him come to me? And boy, it pounced on him. Now, we learn then that he's going to pounce on him, taking the characteristics, the nature, the strategy of three animals. The first is Leviathan. Leviathan wanted his human spirit. The second is the lion. The lion wanted his human body. And now we're going to look at his attack as the serpent who wanted his human soul. So if you'll come back here to the book of Genesis. Now I believe that as the serpent, Lucifer was trying to get Jesus Christ to be Antichrist. That's what he was trying to get him to be. He was trying to get him to be the prince of this world. Now, not the prince of this world as he has won and with the title will come back to be in God's will and timing and plan, but the prince of this world in keeping with Lucifer's plan and strategy and the like. So we come back here to the book of Genesis, chapter 3, and verse number 4. If you were to pick one of the three animals that primarily, most predominantly, is the epitome of evil and all that it symbolizes, which of the three would you pick? Leviathan, the lion, or the serpent? The serpent, obviously. Now, he's already tried Leviathan, he's already tried the lion. Now he's going to try as the serpent. And this takes us all the way back to the original setting in the garden. Now, why? Because Adam was the first. Christ is called the last Adam. The scripture sets these two men up as the head of two races. Theologically, that's called federal headship. So that if man is going to be tested, the entire population wasn't tested under the conditions of innocence. One man was. Thinking that if this is the best as a representative of all, if you can get the best to succeed or the best to fail, then the rest are going to follow suit. So, there were no other men. There's only one that God tested as far as the human race is concerned. And by that one man, we all, sad to say, failed. Lucifer, as the serpent, got him to buy the package of evil. And we've talked about what that is. Now, on the other hand, in the plan and program of God, there is no need for Lucifer really to attack the others, though he does. If you can attack one man and get the other populace to follow suit. If Christ were to sin, anybody that's in Christ would be represented by their federal head. And so there is a special attack on the two federal heads of the human race, representing two categories of people. Now, what was the plan of evil? Just the opposite of the plan of God. It's the best of life, leaving God out. Verse 4. The serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, your eyes will be opened, and you'll be as gods, knowing good and evil. That's what the serpent got Adam to buy into. The loss of the human spirit, the gaining of the sin nature, those really are incidental to what went on in the soul. An embracing of an anti-God policy that God himself calls evil. All right, now, let's go to Luke chapter 4. Luke chapter 4. And it's in this portion that we looked at before. We're going to look at another aspect of it, wherein we see Satan's real attempt, what he really wanted, his objective. It says in verse 5, the devil took him up to a high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. Now remember, this was an aspect too with regard to Leviathan. Leviathan didn't show him the kingdoms of the world, but Leviathan wanted him to fear. That's if a guy fears for his own life, he's liable to compromise, he'll capitulate. Oh, I give in. Oh, don't drown me, and that type deal. And so here he is. We with this and the other things we show that Leviathan was making him see that he had the power. Oh, just don't make a slip up, because I'm going to take this cross, I'm going to plunge it just like you did to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and Pharaoh. So Lucifer has the power to make him see these things. All this, the kingdoms of the world, in a moment of time. The devil said, all this power I'll give you, and the glory of them, for that is delivered unto me. And here is where we get, he wanted him to be Antichrist, and to whomsoever I will give it. Lucifer is the prince of the power of the air and the prince of this world. But the only title he really wants is the Most High possessor of heaven and earth, where he will rule over everything, and he is going to give, as God the Father will, the earth to a man. That man is called Antichrist. But if Lucifer can get Jesus Christ to forget the plan of the Father and buy into evil, then the angelic conflict is won by Lucifer. And that's what he's doing. Hey, you can have the earth. The Father says you can have it. I'll tell you what, I'll give it to you right now. Here it is, the title deed to it. You can have all these nations, all these cities, the glory, the power. You can sit on whatever throne you want. Here it is. Here's the world. All you have to do is, verse 7, if you worship me, all shall be thine. So he was trying to get Jesus Christ to be Antichrist. Now, I believe that is one of the attacks. It was against Christ, like he did Adam, to buy into evil. Let's go to John chapter 7. John chapter 7. Now, in John 7 and some of these other scriptures that we're going to look at, we're going to see that Jesus Christ, up until the point of the cross, did not buy into it. What Lucifer showed him on that mountain were the kingdoms of the world system, and offered him the world system if he'll just worship Lucifer. Now, here's what the Lord said, John 7, verse 7. The world cannot hate you. Now, mind you, who he's talking to are his own kinfolks. Mary had other sons and daughters. And it says in verse number 5, neither did his brethren, these are the children from Mary and Joseph, believe in him. So he said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. They were part of the world system. So he says the world can't hate you. Why? You're part of it. But me it hates, because I testified of it that the works thereof are evil. See, that's the point. If he had become Antichrist, he would have been the head of the world system. He would have been status quo, all that evil, all that symbolized evil. He would have been, just as Adam was whenever he sinned back at that time. He would have been the man of the hour for Lucifer. But he testified against the world system that it was evil. Let's go to chapter 17 and John. Now, let's start in here with verse number 6. There's quite a few verses we want to look at, but they're all important to this subject of what was Lucifer trying to do to Jesus Christ on the cross as the serpent. I have manifested thy name to the men that you gave me out of the world. Thine they were, you gave them to me, they have kept thy word. Now they have known that all things whatsoever you have given me are of thee. For I have given them thy words, which thou gavest me, and they have received them. And have surely known that I have come out from thee, and they believe that you sent me. Now note his prayer here. Therefore I pray for them. Why? Because I'm not praying for the world, but for them which you have given me, for they are thine. There's a difference between those people who were in the world but not of the world, and those who were of the world. Jesus Christ, as he was hanging on the cross, was given the opportunity to end it all, end the pain and suffering and agony, and be given the world on a silver platter if he had just given in to Lucifer and worship him, and if he had become evil. All right, let's move on. Verse number 11. And now I am no more in the world, but these are in the world. I'm coming to you. Keep through thine own name those whom thou hast given me, that they might be one as we are one. While I was with them in the world, I kept them. Let's move on down here to verse 13. Now I come to thee, and these things I speak in the world, that they might have my joy fulfilled in them. Why is he speaking to them and they are left behind in the world? Why are they going to be joyful? Well, because they're told, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. But he's praying to the Father and saying, show them love. You're in the midst of this difficulty, help them to realize you still love them because they're not of the world. Okay? Here's what he did, and this is pertaining to the cross. I've given them thy word. The world has hated them, because they are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. The battle on the cross was for Christ to be part of the world system and its strategy of evil. I pray not that you take them out of the world, but thou shalt keep them from the evil. Now, let's think of the Lord's Prayer. What did it say? Lead us not into temptation, but keep us from what? Evil. Don't buy into the evil of the world system. And the world system that is spoken of in the Lord's Prayer, who is the head of the world system? Antichrist. And the whole thing here is that Christ is setting an example between the two. So let's move on. They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. Sanctify them through thy truth. Thy word is truth. As thou hast sent me into the world, I've sent them into the world, but for their sakes I sanctify myself. Now, he's making an issue of the fact that he has not become part of the world system. And that's the issue on the cross. He kept himself from buying into Satan's plan of evil. And that means he was sanctified. He kept from thinking evil. Just as those in the tribulation are going to have to be kept from thinking evil, taking the mark. That they might be sanctified through the truth. Neither pray I for these alone, but for them also which shall believe on my word. And so it goes on here just simply to talk about that sanctification. All right. Let's go to point 2 here and go back to Numbers. Numbers chapter 21. Numbers chapter 21. Now, in this particular chapter, we're going to be introduced to some things that are going to help us to know what's going on the cross. It comes by way of shadow theology, but it's real and relevant nonetheless. Back in the Garden of Eden, the serpent was located where? On the tree. So now we're going to look through a time, and we're going to see that God gives us a type of the Lord Jesus Christ, and what is going to, why he has to be on this tree, and what's going to happen to him there. All right? Numbers chapter 21, verse 8. Now, the people were griping and complaining and moaning and whining, and God said, enough of this. He sent them fiery serpents. They were being bitten, and some of them were dying. Give us a solution. Here was God's. Verse 8. Make the fiery serpent. Now, we're going to see in a moment that fieriness has to do with it being made of brass that looks like fire. That's the reason that you come into the tabernacle or the temple, and the first instrument of furniture there is what altar? The brazen altar. And there was fire there, and every sacrifice was on a grate with fire beneath it, and you killed them, and it was right there to be burned. And it symbolized judgment, God's judgment for sin, and God's judgment of evil, really, on this, and set it on a pole. This is the picture of the cross. It'll come to pass that everyone that is bitten, when he looks upon it, it shall live. Moses made a serpent of brass and put it on a pole. And it came to pass that if the serpent had been bitten at any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, he lived. So, here you have that picture. Now, who is on the cross here? Serpent. Jesus Christ had to do two things. He had to be judged for evil. Now, remember this. We make a distinction between the activity of evil and the philosophy of evil. He did not die for the activity of evil. Is there evil activity going on in churches all across America and the world? Absolutely. Evil is man trying to merit God's favor, or man trying to be as gods, as the verse said. He did not die for that. There is not a law which can give men life. We have to look to the Lord Jesus Christ. But he assumed, as it were, the place of the serpent on the tree, the philosophy of evil. And that's what's being done here. He was made the brazen serpent so that he could be punished for the philosophy of evil without becoming evil. Now that's the trick. That was the soul strain of Christ. That's what he was going through. Because the offer was, if he just gave, he could have it all anyway, if he just gave in. But instead, he was judged for evil, but he did not buy into evil. And in fact, that made the judgment more valid and more real. So let's go to the book of John, chapter 3. John chapter 3. Now, this is vitally important because it shows what Jesus Christ really believed in. He believed that human existence was really a waste without the presence of God. And he was willing so much to demonstrate that he was anti-evil, which is the best of life apart from God, that he was judged for the entire strategy of it, but he never gave in to it. He never said to God the Father, "Phooey on this, man. I'm getting out of here. Why do I have to go through this for these people? I'll just take it all now and forget you." But he believed in God being included in human existence so much that he took everything that Lucifer dished out, died for the philosophy of evil, came through, and after it was all said and done, he said, "Father, into your hands. Father, you've been far from helping me. Swoop in and help me now." He addressed the Father because he was anti-evil. Chapter 3, verse number 14. This is how we know that the serpent there and the serpent in the Garden of Eden was also what Christ was judged for on the cross. He became the brazen serpent. As Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. So, what he's doing there is being judged for evil. But here's the thing. Come to chapter 12. John chapter 12. Verse number 31. The difference between the serpent, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and Jesus Christ on the tree, and there are several scriptures that call the cross a tree, or then specifically identifying it as the tree. Just wasn't any tree Christ died on. It was the one that became the cross. But whenever man bought into the policy of evil, or whenever Lucifer was trying to convince man to buy into it, it was to draw men away from God. It was to say, you'll not surely die. God has said it, but don't believe him. God has done this, but you don't have to do his will, and that sort of thing. Jesus Christ on the cross of Calvary reversed it. Note, verse number 31. Now is the judgment of this world. It's that Jesus Christ on the cross is standing for an anti-evil policy. He's dying for evil, but at the same time he's showing that he doesn't believe in evil. He has to be punished for it, but at the same time he's not going to be part of it. He's in the world, but he's not of the world. And so that's why he says, now is the judgment of this world. The philosophy of the world is evil, epitomized by the serpent and the tree. And now the brazen serpent, the one that shows the judgment of God, he's going to become to judge the world for their evil and evil works. Now note who else is included in this. Now shall the prince of this world be cast out. Lucifer's going to offer it to Christ. He's going to continue to offer it to Christ as the serpent to the cross. Why go through this, man? Why are you struggling? Why don't you just give in? I'll treat you royally. You'll be the best. No one will be better than you. Just worship me and quit this suffering throughout the ordeal of the cross. And yet he never bought into the philosophy of evil. So much so that he did not become Antichrist. But what he did do was judge Antichrist. The human ruler that will best epitomize the plan of evil on earth for all the world is Antichrist. But note what it says. Now, the prince of this world is going to be judged. Because if I be lifted up, just like Moses lifted up the serpent, I will draw all men unto me. This, he said, signifying what death did die. He reversed the anti-evil policy. Serpent on the tree, away from God. Christ on the tree, drawing toward God. And it's sort of that magnetic attraction and the like. Now, let's go to Revelation chapter 12. Just a couple of things here. We're just about out of time. Book of Revelation, chapter 12. Just as we're finishing up this ninth part, we want to do two things. One is just further document that Lucifer is that serpent. And that this was all part of his plan and part of the angelic conflict. That he is Leviathan, one of the human spirit. He is the lion, one of the human body. But he, as the serpent, wanted the soul. Just as he got the soul of Adam, he wanted the soul of Jesus Christ. And the place that was the most vicious, intense attack of this was during those 3 hours of darkness on the cross. But now we're in Revelation 12. Let's look at verse 9. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceived the whole world. In deceiving the whole world, and the world believing in Antichrist, that he was God and so forth, in actuality was his stratagem, was his genius, was his brilliance in getting the entire world per se to buy into evil by believing that another man was the prince of this world, another man was the Jewish Messiah. We call him Antichrist. But let's introduce part 10 by going back to Psalms. Psalms 97, our last portion. Now, what did Lucifer want Adam to do? What was his argument there? You'll not surely die if you go against or cross the will of God. He did die, but of course Adam didn't believe it. He bought into evil. Because it says, you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. That they themselves would become gods, masters of their own fate. All they had to do was worship him or bow down to him, believe him, and he would make them gods. And so that's what Adam and Eve believed. That's the plan of evil, that they would be gods and sharing together with Lucifer. Lucifer will make them God. That the true and living God has selfish motivation. He doesn't want you to do that, but you'll be his gods. But they end up worshiping another God. All this I'll give you. I'll give you the world if you'll bow down and worship me. Now here's the Lord on the cross. And here's what he is thinking. Verse 9. For thou, Lord, art high above all the earth. Thou art exalted above all gods. The true and living God is the only God in actuality to be worshipped. And that's why Jesus said that him only shall you serve. Bow down to worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve. And he kept on remembering this. Verse number 10. Ye that love the Lord hate evil. Jesus Christ had to keep remembering. Though the Father and the Spirit were not there, no one else was there around, though Lucifer was on him and trying to make him buy into evil, he had to remember, love not the world. If any man love the world, the love of the Father is not in him. He was trying to be made evil and to get to reject the plan of the Father. The Father doesn't love you, going through all this pain and suffering. Remember that. Just forget him. Take things in your own hands. Quit suffering in this way. Ye that love the Lord hate evil. Why? Because he will preserve the souls of his saints. He will deliver them out of the hand of the wicked. And that was the whole thing. 3 hours on the cross, he had to remember that this would not last forever, that it would soon be over if he made it to that point. That the Father would indeed show his love and approval and appreciation for his Son in exalting him far above all.